Thank you. As we begin this morning, the Commissioners wish to acknowledge the First Peoples of Australia. We offer our respect and thanks to the Gadigal elders of the Eora Nation, past and present, and all traditional owners across Australia. Uncle Alan Madden is with us, and I ask him to give the traditional welcome to country. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, my name is Alan Madden, Gadigal Elder. Your Honour, Prime Minister, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I'd like to acknowledge our Aboriginal elders, all elders, past and present, and pay my respects to all our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander brothers and sisters. From whatever Aboriginal or island nation you may have come from, welcome to Gadigal. And to all our non-Indigenous brothers and sisters here today, a very warm and sincere welcome to you to Gadigal. No matter where you've come from, whether it be across the seas, across the state or across town, once again, a very warm and sincere welcome to you to Gadigal. As I've mentioned many times before, was, is, and always will be Aboriginal land. Yes. Only three things shorter than that: coming, taxation and going. It is an honour and pleasure to be here today to welcome one and all to Gadigal. Gadigal is one of 29 clans of the Eora Nation. The Eora Nation is bounded by nature's own, the Hawkesbury River to the north, the Pean to the west, and Georges River to the south. And in between those three mighty rivers is the Eora Nation. And in that nation, there are 29 clans. The clan's land we're on today is Gadigal. On behalf of members of the Metropolitan Local Aboriginal Land Council and of the Gadigal mob, once again, a very warm and sincere welcome to you to Gadigal. And as you travel across these traditional lands and waters, may the spirits of our ancestors guide, look over you, and keep you safe. So once again, on behalf of the Land Council and of the Gadigal mob, welcome, welcome, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Uncle Alan. On the 12th of November 2012, Prime Minister Julia Gillard announced the creation of the Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sexual Abuse. It was to be a national commission held jointly with each of the states and territories. The announcement was supported by the Honourable Tony Abbott, who was then the Leader of the Opposition in the Australian Parliament. On the 11th of January the following year, the Prime Minister announced that the Governor-General had agreed to establish the Royal Commission, and the letters patent were issued. On that occasion, the Prime Minister said that she believed our nation needs to have this Royal Commission. Child sexual abuse is a hideous, shocking and vile crime. And it is clear from what is already in the public domain that too many children were the subject of child sexual abuse in institutions. That they've had to live with the trauma of that child sexual abuse for the rest of their lives. That they weren't provided with a safe childhood and a safe place to be. And that too many adults who could have assisted them turned a blind eye so that they didn't get the help that they needed. The Prime Minister spoke of her hope that the Royal Commission will bring about this systemic change that people have been wanting for such a long time. She spoke of their need for redress and support, and for some, the need for treatment. She also anticipated in 3 years, the end date could be extended if necessary. Finally, the Prime Minister emphasised the potential for the Royal Commission to make sure that the terrible wrongs that have been done in the past to children in our country, to the greatest extent, never happen again. The Royal Commission held its opening sitting in Melbourne on the 3rd of April 2013. On that occasion, I spoke of the intention of the government to seek an amendment of the Royal Commission Acts to enable the Royal Commission to receive the personal stories of individuals in what have become known as private sessions. As the government anticipated, private sessions have been one of the fundamental tasks of this Royal Commission. On that day, we also opened our telephone call centre to enable survivors to make contact with us to report allegations of sexual abuse in an institutional context and make arrangements to attend a private session. In all, more than 15,000 people who we have confirmed to be within our terms of reference have contacted the Royal Commission. Childhood lost, their education and prospective career taken from them, and their personal relationships damaged for the rest of their lives. For many, sexual abuse is a trauma they can never escape. It can affect every aspect of their lives. We also witnessed extraordinary determination and resilience. We spoke with many people who, with professional help and the support of others, have taken significant steps towards recovery. The Commissioners thank each of the survivors who told us their personal stories. They have had a profound impact on the Commissioners and our staff. Without them, we could not have done our work. Each survivor's story is important to us. Their stories have helped us to identify what should be done to make institutions safer for children in the future. It has been a privilege for the Commissioners to sit with and listen to survivors. The survivors are remarkable people with a common concern to do what they can to ensure that other children are not abused. They deserve our nation's thanks. Many survivors have been assisted by organisations whose purpose is to support them and advocate on their behalf. Early in our work, we met with the leaders of these groups and we continued to work with them throughout the Royal Commission. They helped us to develop an appropriate private sessions process and worked with our counsellors to ensure the well-being of all survivors who came to us. Supporters and advocates assisted in the preparation of written accounts, attended as support persons in private sessions, and assisted witnesses in our public hearings. They have our great respect for the remarkable work they do, often with very limited resources. The Royal Commission conducted a total of 57 case studies, resulting in 44 separate reports to government. Because of ongoing criminal investigations and prosecutions, we have recommended that our case study reports concerning Catholic Church authorities in Ballarat and Melbourne and some events in New South Wales and the Anglican Diocese of Newcastle should be suppressed in whole or in part until the criminal process has been concluded. Although I know this will disappoint some people, it is important that nothing should occur that might compromise any criminal proceedings. To gain an understanding of past events and develop recommendations to bring effective change across a broad range of complex issues, we needed the cooperation of many people and institutions. Although this was not always the case, many institutions and government agencies accepted that they had failed and engaged constructively with us in discussions about how they should change. The Commissioners thank the governments and all of the institutions and individuals who participated in our various consultation processes, including our many round tables that have assisted in developing our recommendations. We also thank the media organisations for their interest and comprehensive reporting of the Royal Commission's work. Many media outlets provided extensive coverage. The ABC reported every case study on television, radio, almost every sitting day. The work of the Royal Commission in many areas was led by Ms Gail Finesse, Senior Counsel Assisting. Together with a number of other counsel, she was responsible for multiple forensic tasks required of the Royal Commission. However, her contribution to the inquiry extended well beyond those tasks. She played a significant role in the development of our recommended policy responses in many areas. More than 680 people worked for the Royal Commission during its life, across the varied range of our activities. The Commissioners thank each of them. Although the work was stressful and often confronting, they came to the Royal Commission intent on seeing change to improve the safety of children and a just response for survivors. A number of aspects of our work were unique, particularly our engagement with survivors and the wider community. Our research and policy development covered a broad range of issues. Our public hearings required intense and comprehensive preparation. The development of our conclusions, recommendations and reports involved input from staff across the organisation. Our senior management team, together with the chief executives, ensured that the Royal Commission completed our task in a timely manner and within budget. We are particularly appreciative of the contribution of Chief Executive Mr Philip Reid to the Royal Commission's effective operation. More than 4,000 individual institutions have been reported to us as places where abuse has occurred. While some institutions have ceased to operate, others continue to be actively engaged with children and young people. The most effective use of our resources and the risk of prejudicing criminal investigations or prosecutions meant that we could not publicly examine or report on many institutions in which survivors told us they had been sexually abused and that the response to their allegations was inadequate. The failure to protect children has not been limited to institutions providing services to children. Some of our most important state instrumentalities have failed. Police often refuse to believe children. They refuse to investigate their complaints of abuse. Many children who had attempted to escape abuse were returned to unsafe institutions by the police. Child protection agencies did not listen to children. They did not act on their concerns, leaving them in situations of danger. Our criminal justice system has created many barriers to the successful prosecution of alleged perpetrators. Investigation processes were inadequate and criminal procedures were inappropriate. Our civil law placed impossible barriers on survivors bringing claims against individual abusers and institutions. Many institutions we examined did not have a culture where the best interests of children were the priority. Some leaders did not take responsibility for their institution's failure to protect children. Some leaders felt their primary responsibility was to protect the institution's reputation and the accused person. Many did not recognise the impact this had on children. Poor practices, inadequate governance structures, failures to record and report complaints, or understating the seriousness of complaints have been frequent. The greatest number of alleged perpetrators and abused children in church-managed facilities that we are aware of were in Roman Catholic institutions. In many religious institutions in particular, but not only the Catholic Church, the power afforded to people in religious ministry and the misplaced trust of parents, combined with aspects of the culture, practices and attitudes within the institutions to create risks for children. Alleged perpetrators were often allowed to have access to children even when religious leaders knew they posed a danger. Alleged perpetrators were often transferred to another location where they had access to children but were never reported to police. It was obvious to the Commissioners early in our work that in many institutions there were structural and cultural problems that had allowed and in some cases facilitated the sexual abuse of children. Some of those problems had the consequence that when the abuse was brought to the notice of the institution, the response was inadequate and in many cases unjust. It may have been because it to protect the reputation of the institution or just to protect the aggressive hand of the lawyer was engaged, ensuring that an appropriate and just response to a survivor was not possible. The sexual abuse of children is not just a problem from the past. Child sexual abuse Commission has already provided 3 policy reports to government, working with children checks, civil litigation and redress and criminal justice. The final report, which will be given to the Governor-General tomorrow, apart from detailing our conclusions and recommendations, will cover a broad range of issues relating to both government and institutions. There may be leaders and members of some institutions who resent the intrusion of the Royal Commission into their affairs. However, if the problems we have identified are to be adequately addressed, changes must be made. There must be changes in the culture, structure and governance practices of many institutions. This Royal Commission has been concerned with the sexual abuse of children within institutions. It is important to remember that notwithstanding the problems we have identified, the number of children who are sexually abused in familial or other circumstances far exceeds those who are abused in institutions. The sexual abuse of any child is intolerable in a civilised society. It is the responsibility of our entire community to acknowledge that children are being abused. We must each resolve that we should do what we can to protect them. The tragic impact of abuse for individuals, and through them our entire society, demands nothing less. There is one final act that we must perform today. Every person who attended a private session was invited to send us a short written message. Strictly anonymous, they were told that their message, which we have called A Message to Australia, would be bound in a large book which will carry that name. The National Library of Australia has kindly accepted the role of custodian of the Message to Australia book. It's actually on the bar table. I'm going to ask Counsel assisting the Commission, Gail Finesse, to explain a little more of the context of the book. Unfortunately, the Director-General of the National Library could not join us today, but the New South Wales State Librarian and Chief Executive, Dr. John Vallance, is with us to receive the book and speak on behalf of Dr. Marie-Louise Ayres, the Director-General of the National Library. Ms Finesse.
Thank you, Your Honour. As Your Honour has said, personal stories of victims and survivors have been at the heart of the Royal Commission's work. Royal Commissioners have held over 8,000 private sessions and received written accounts from over 1,300 survivors. After attending a private session or providing a written account, survivors were invited to contribute a message to be included in a commemorative collection, as His Honour has indicated, to be called Message to Australia. Survivors were free to write about their experience or their hopes for the future. The resulting book, which I have to say is too heavy to lift, is here on the bar table. It has over 1,000 pages and features more than 1,000 messages from survivors not only across Australia but also around the world. Many of the messages in the book are in survivors' own handwriting. I'd like to read some contributions in the book. At long last, for the first time in 26 years, I had a feeling of empowerment by telling my story to the Commissioner, who allowed me to have a voice. Hopefully, society awareness and government action should never allow child abuse to ever happen again. I have come forward to tell my story so that the gaps in the system can be filled and no one should have to tell their story in the future. I was robbed of any chance of a productive life because of the pain, shame and guilt of child sexual abuse. Now I feel I continue to justify my existence in Australian society. And finally, for us that once had no voice, now we can be heard. And for us whose lives were destroyed, now we can begin to heal. Now, again, as His Honour has said, the Message to Australia book will be held in the National Library as well as in all state and territory libraries. And on behalf of the Commissioners, I thank the National Library and each state and territory library for being the custodians of the book and making available the messages to all. I will hand over to the New South Wales State Librarian.
Dr. Vallance.
Honourable Justice McClellan, Honourable Justice Coate, Commissioners, Senior Counsel, distinguished guests, and most importantly, all those present whose lives have been touched by sexual abuse in institutional settings and who've had the courage to bear witness to their suffering and to hold perpetrators to account. As His Honour said, I'm reading this speech, which has been prepared by my colleague, Dr. Marie-Louise Ayres, who's the Director General of the National Library of Australia. And on her behalf, I'm honoured to accept this volume here, Message to Australia, in which individuals who shared their stories with the Royal Commission chose also to share those stories and their hopes for a safer future for children with the wider Australian community. The volume will be permanently retained in our collection, with a copy also held in each state and territory library to ensure that these personal stories are never forgotten. And again, this is Dr. Ayres speaking. Accepting this volume has deep personal resonance for me. A very dear friend shared his story with the Commission in a face-to-face interview. He could not speak highly enough about the experience of being truly heard and about the healing this enabled. His message is in this book. I've told him that we will keep it safe. The National Library is deeply sensible of the trust you have placed in us to keep all of your stories safe. The Library has already received, either in physical or digital form, Commission reports, case studies, consultation papers, pamphlets, posters, booklets and kits. The Commission's website and published research has been archived, ensuring that this online record of the Commission is also kept safe. We will conduct oral history interviews with some of those associated with the Commission over the next year, and the Library will soon receive a collection of precious items handed over by survivors during the interviews with the Commission. These drawings, letters, diaries, poems, autobiographies, maps, newspaper clippings and objects are the most personal, the most intimate of records of pain, fear, grief, rage, despair, hopelessness, and also of hope, love and survival. Together, this collection means that all Australians, now and in the future, will be able to hear directly from those most affected by these grievous of offences against children, to know the truth of their stories, and to know that the nation listened to every one of these messages. The Library is also the custodian of oral histories, books, pamphlets and personal items documenting the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families whose lives were torn asunder. Is also the custodian of oral histories, books, pamphlets and personal items documenting the lives of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander families whose lives were torn asunder through separation of children from their parents